Okay, it's time for episode 34. It's me, Chucky from the forums, and with you as always is Jigsaw.
Indeed, I am.
Yep, the usual stellar lineup that we provide for today. It's 5 movies. We're going to start things off with Wrong Turn from 2003. I'd say, well, it's a slasher movie, so we'll talk more about that soon. After that, we'll be discussing The Incredible Melting Man from 1977. A bit of a gooey, monsterish man type movie. Then we move on to a sequel, Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed from 2004. Then after that, we're going to discuss Stuart Gordon's last directorial, which is Stuck from 2007. And then we finish things off with Cut and Run from 1985 from Ruggero Deodato.
That was a beautiful pronunciation. So we are starting off tonight with Wrong Turn from 2003, which is a pretty, I would have to imagine, well-known movie, in which these 6 people run amok of 3 sort of inbred, mutated hillbilly folk in the deep forests of West Virginia. And it's honestly, the plot-wise, it's somewhat bare bones. These people meet up accidentally with a car crash, then they go try to find help, and boom, they get attacked by these, well, cannibalistic hillbilly people. And for the rest of the movie, they're just trying to survive as best they can. Plot-wise, it's not like it's a very deep movie, but I've always found it a consistently enjoyable movie. And I think that generally, were it not for like the somewhat absurd amount of sequels the series has, the first movie, well, not amazing, I think it's pretty good. But before I talk about some of my favorite things in this movie, what do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I like this one too. Like I said, it's not like an amazing movie, but it's really enjoyable. It does what it needs to do. There's a lot of things this movie does right, I think. Even though nothing spectacular, but there's a lot of things it does right. Probably one of the biggest things it does right is, and this is something I really appreciate, is that it's one of those movies that knows its runtime. It's short and sweet. I don't even think this movie really goes much further than 75 minutes. It's so short. But it's one of those movies that doesn't need to be any longer. I mean, you feel like you've watched a full movie by the time you're done, and it never had really any dry spots or, any... You're not, stuck in 10 to 20 minutes of just boring... whatever it is, boring dialogue, whatever it is. It's a movie that just keeps on moving until it's done.
I mean, if you want an action-packed horror movie, this is a good choice.
Yeah, definitely.
One of my, I guess, if I have to say my favorite scene in the movie, is when these characters are sort of looking through the house. They just stumble upon it. They each find something somewhat creepy. A room full of keys and dolls and such. Looks what looks like to be a body in a bathtub. Then the 3 guys come home, but before they can leave, they get there, so they have to hide. And while they're hiding, these 3 inbred, terrifying individuals are sort of trapping up a friend of theirs, basically right in front of them. I mean, 2 other people can see, 2 of them can't really see what's going on. And as an audience, we don't really see that much either. But you just know what's going on. Is this, ungodly, terrifying scene. And you can tell, as soon as they try to leave, once the people are asleep, the tension in that scene, by the way, is amazing. But once they try to leave, you can see how sort of traumatized that made, at least that one woman.
Yeah, there's some decent suspense and tension in this movie. I agree with that. In fact, just from that scene, there's a few things I guess I'd say about it. Number one, I mean, if I was in that scene, because they kind of stay hidden inside the house while they're chopping up and then eventually going to sleep. So I don't know exactly how long they're in there, but it feels like they've been in there for at least an hour, maybe longer. And I mean, if that was me, I wouldn't be able to stay quiet that long. I'd have farted or something. But just before they go into that house, the one woman's complaining that she's got to go to the bathroom, and I'm thinking, hello, you're in the fucking woods. Just piss on the ground.
Although that did lead to that beautiful line, I think this is the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be fair, that was one messed up house.
Yeah, I mean, the outside is a lot cleaner than the inside.
And actually, now that I think about it, it's worth mentioning that in some ways, this seems like a new age, almost Texas Chainsaw Massacre-like movie. You know, obviously, I think you can also relate it to The Hills of Eyes. But this movie always felt just a bit more realistic to me than those other movies. And I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that I know that West Virginia is an iffy place. Even though this movie was filmed in Canada, on a side note. So if you're from West Virginia, don't be too offended. But this movie always struck me as a, somewhat realistic movie, aside from maybe the amount of inbred mutations some of those guys have.
What was your favorite kill in the movie? There's a couple that stood out to me.
That is an interesting question. You tell me yours, and I'll try to figure out what mine is.
Okay. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between the axe to the face while they're up in the trees, because there's that scene where you see the top part of the head still sitting up on the axe, but the bottom half, well, not half, mostly everything below is just kind of falling down. That's one of those scenes that's kind of memorable. And I guess the other one, which is a little more quicker, it was the arrow to the eye to that police officer.
Yeah, I was actually going to say it's probably either the death of the police officer, or maybe early on when there's another character who gets shot with some arrows. Mainly because, at least with the first guy, you expect that he's going to get hit. He's running to the car, he's pretty close, he looks like he might make it, but boom, an arrow comes by. Then he gets, I think, hit by 2 more.
You've got a bit of an arrow fetish, because both your deaths involve arrows.
Well, yes. I always did like the idea of archery used as a way to kill someone. And it comes up in some movies every now and again, but I can't think of any movie that focuses primarily on that. But I do enjoy though how one of the brothers, I'm assuming they're brothers, and one of them actually knows archery, so that's nice. I'm assuming living off the land and hunting, be it animals or a human, well, it has its benefits.
Yeah. Someone better watch out if they ever see you in an archery store then.
I remember doing archery back in school. I was terrible at it, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's one particular line in this movie that really cracks me up every time I see it. Is that line just before they go into the house by Jeremy Sisto, where he says, "I got to remind you of a movie called Deliverance." I mean, you don't even need to really see Deliverance to know why that's fun. I mean, as long as you know what Deliverance is about, that line just always gets me.
On a side note, I've obviously seen this movie multiple times, but I actually forgot who Jeremy's sister was before I started watching it. So, in my opinion, he's easily my favorite character here. Like, the main guy seems somewhat, somewhat hollow through most of the movie. I mean, he's okay, but I feel like he doesn't get a whole lot of character. But Jeremy's sister's character, actually quite a bit of fun. And I guess it's also worth mentioning that most of the characters in the movie seem like pretty decent people. In a lot of slasher movies you have some stereotypical jocks and some dicks, but most of the people here seem like good people, so that was sort of nice too.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where you truly do kind of root for the good guys. So, well, the supposedly good guys, because I don't see how anyone could see the hillbilly hicks as being the good guys.
Hey, they were protecting the land from the invaders.
yeah.
Maybe if you're an American, you can get.
I mean, speaking of the lead guy, I thought he did all right in the movie. In fact, I was kind of surprised that he didn't get bigger roles as his career moved on. I felt like after doing this movie, I just kind of expected him to blow up a bit more than he did. He seems to more play smaller roles in movies, I think.
Yeah, I've not seen him in that many things, but I know he was in a movie, I think it came out the same year, called Love Object, which is a very, if you've not seen it, it's very sort of a slow moving but very interesting sort of psychological horror type movie.
Yeah. It feels like his name is a black guy's name. Desmond Harrington, that just sounds like a black guy's name to me. Not that it matters, but it's just one of those things that's just so unusual. I mean, it's like if an
Asian guy's name is named Mike.
Yeah, so, I mean, something like that.
To be honest, I never really thought about it, mainly because I recognized him once I saw him, but it's not like a guy I particularly, like I said, like I've seen in many things.
But one thing I will say that I didn't really enjoy was the opening to the movie. I mean, the scene's okay, it's just, I think it's the weakest part of the movie. The idea behind it, you know, the rock climbing and that, the situation, it's a decent idea. Just for some reason, I don't know, I guess the way it was filmed, it didn't really hit me as good as the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily a great opening, but it's only like maybe 4 minutes long, so it's not like it's not great for long.
Sometimes that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to have the opening not be entirely all that strong, because I have seen a lot of movies where the opening is good and the rest of the movie is just dry, so it's definitely a lot better this way than that way. One other thing is, and this has really been bugging me the last 10 years that movies do this, but this is something that the movie doesn't do, which I think is good. This movie has a post-credit scene, but technically it's only about 10 seconds after the credits start rolling.
I know, it's nice.
Yeah, you don't have to wait long to notice there's a post-credit scene. But there's so many movies now, like over the past 10 years, that have quite often been putting scenes like right at the end of the credits, like after a 5-minute duration of watching names go up on the screen, then they show something, which is really inconvenient, especially when you're at like a theater. I mean, depending on what the movie is, most of the time you get up and you leave once the credits are kind of rolling, and sometimes you're even pressured to get up and leave by people who work at the theater. They're like, come on, yeah. Movie's over, get out!
Like when I watched the 2019 Child's Play, I actually sat there through the whole credits just in case. And it's I'm the only one there. Everybody else left. It was just awkward as hell.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there, on a side note. I feel like half the time it's not worth staying for. I mean, just look at the Evil Dead remake.
That's the one I was going to mention as well, and I think we actually discussed this when we talked about that movie. But yeah, I heard people talk about this post-credit scene, which is like 4 seconds long. Well, it ended up being 4 seconds long, and it was just Bruce Campbell saying groovy or something. I was like, I'm so glad I didn't stay to watch that fucking thing.
I think post-credit scenes have their place, and I personally don't mind when Marvel movies do it, but that's how I'm a fan of the Marvel movies. But most anybody else, it's generally not necessary.
Yeah. Plus, the actual post-credit scene in this movie, I think, is pretty enjoyable. I think.
Yeah, it's actually worth watching.
Yeah, it's not a long scene or anything, but I like the image, like the outline of the character. You see him standing there in the dark with the axe. It's really good. And the other good thing about the credits is that they have a Breaking Benjamin song playing, so they're one of the best bands out there. They hardly ever write a bad song. Yeah, in fact, that was the first song I ever listened to from them before I even watched this movie, so that's the first song that got me into listening to them. I don't know if you listen to them, but they're a really good group.
I know that they are a band and they had a CD or two, and that's pretty much all I know about them.
Oh, they've got more than a CD or two. They release one like every 2 years. and they're still going strong. They don't even tour internationally, and they have like 6 million likes on Facebook or something.
I listen to some music like that, but not too much.
One other thing. Now, obviously, I mean, it's got Eliza Dushku in the movie, and I know that she's got quite a few fans, obviously, and some guys really, like her look. I mean, she's attractive enough to me, but...
Are you more the red-haired chick?
No. No, I still preferred Eliza, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but I'm more of that type than the redhead type. Though I do appreciate the redhead really eager to, get that guy's pants off.
She was actually one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, I remember her in another movie somewhere around that time, Cry Wolf. I think she was the main girl in that. But anyways, the thing about Eliza Dushku is that I swear to God, like 90% of her movies or shows that she's in were filmed while she's on a period. I think thankfully in Wrong Turn this doesn't happen, but she just usually always feels like she's got this really bitchy vibe. You just can't shake it. It's like something about her, I don't know. But thankfully in this movie, this is like maybe the only movie or thing I've seen her in where I don't feel that way about her.
Yeah, it's entirely possible I've never actually seen her in another movie. Not to disappoint you.
That's weird, but okay.
Yeah, so Wrong Turn, it's a nice sort of throwback to the simpler days of movies. Like I said, it sort of has a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type vibe. Only controversial opinion coming up, in my opinion, it's about the movie. And like I said, I've always enjoyed this one. It's not too complicated. You can just put it on and have a good time. On a side note, I sort of wonder if this movie had anything to do with the Hills of Ice remake coming out 3 years later, since it has a somewhat similar feel to it. And I know it's a good movie. It's worth watching. It's a shame that it has I think 5 sequels, and it's good stuff. So I'm going to throw this one an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, boy.
For Snizzle.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10 as well. It's very enjoyable. It does a lot of things right. Yeah, it's like I said, there's 5 sequels to this one, and not a single one comes close to how good this one is. It's been a while since I've seen the other ones, but in fact, I don't think I've even seen part 2 since it came out. Even though I think some people sort of still enjoy that second one, I know it's definitely not as good as this first one. Anyways, yeah, 8 out of 10, that's my score. If there's one thing to learn from the movie...
Don't go to West Virginia.
Well, that too, but maybe for all the youngsters out there, make sure at school, in your PE class, you practice your gymnastics, because you may one day find yourself dodging hillbilly cannibals in the trees.
And you may have to jump from a watchtower.
Yeah, so get on that.
I'll be screwed on a side note, but...
Okay, so next up we've got The Incredible Melting Man from 1977, which is about an astronaut who is transformed into a murderous gelatinous mass after returning from an ill-fated space voyage. I remember renting this on VHS, and funnily enough, that was post-2000s, so it's like one of the last movies that I would have rented on VHS. I remember at the time being somewhat bored by the movie. I wouldn't say it was bad, but I was sort of bored by it. And I have since watched it a couple of more times, and I do start to enjoy it a little bit more than that first time. I think on a whole, it's still a bit dry, like there's not a whole lot happening. I mean, there's things happening, but kind of like the Melting Man himself, the movie doesn't really go anywhere. He just kind of stumbles around. Eventually a few things happen. He runs into someone, he might kill someone. But yeah, it's just one of those movies that I don't think you really needed to do much writing for this one. Speaking of writing, as this movie begins, we see the name Alex Rebar pop up a couple of times, like at the start and right at the end. Like, it's a big name, and I had to go search, who the hell is this guy? And, I mean, it seems he's more of a writer than an actor. He has acted in a few things. I think The Incredible Melting Man is, like, his biggest movie that he's acted in, but, I did see he wrote the movies Demented and the Santa slasher To All a Good Night, which was kind of interesting to hear about. But before I go into more about this, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so I had never seen this one before, and with a title like this, The Incredible Melting Man, it just sounds like one of those movies you have to go see. Well, I'm letting you guys know you do not have to see this. It's just so boring. It's so boring. It had fantastic special effects. I mean, as far as the special effects go, I think it's an A+ movie. But it's just so dry. And, I love the 70s. I think the 70s is one of the better decades for the horror genre. This movie. I mean, it was difficult for me to keep focus. Because, like Chucky says, it's this guy's tumbling around. He runs into somebody. He might kill them. Then it happens again, and we see this military journalist doctor. Oh, let's go look for him, and they don't find him, until the end, even though he's outside, like, the main guy's house for, like, half the movie. It's interesting, and I won't deny it had some charm to it, although I have to say, none of the performances did anything for me besides the two old people, who were, like, pretty much the only, like, sort of comedy relief, but I like them.
That old lady is the greatest actress of all time.
And unfortunately, this is one of her last movies, if not her last movie. And that's actually true for both of them. They died like 2 or 3 years after this came out. So that's somewhat disappointing because, like I said, they're pretty much the only characters here that have character. I mean, the main doctor, I guess, is okay, and the conclusion is actually somewhat interesting. A bit more somber than you might expect. But at the same time, it doesn't really save it. That said, like Chucky says, maybe if I watch this again, I might enjoy it a bit more. But first time through, this was not exactly one of the high-class horror movies from the 70s I recommend to people.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the special effects, and obviously that is the highlight of the movie. There's multiple scenes that are enjoyable, like multiple moments in the movie that are enjoyable just purely because of the special effects. Obviously, the ending where he's melting, that's a really cool scene where you see kind of his head collapse.
Not only is that pretty cool looking, it's actually somewhat depressing too, because you can still tell that the guy is still like human, and you just feel sorry for the guy because he had no control over any of this.
Yeah, and the head floating down the river was kind of amusing as well. That was one of those scenes that kind of sticks in your mind, at least after you finish watching the ait.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually expecting the kids to run into the decapitated head.
Yeah.
But they never sort of, bait and switch.
I mean, once again, it's kind of like the Melting Man. It just moves around but doesn't really go to anywhere. But I believe the special effects were done by Rick Baker. He's quite a popular special effects guy. This is obviously one of his earlier movies, but he's done a lot of big movies as well. So, it's not all that surprising to see that the special effects in this one are good. Another thing was, there's a moment in the movie earlier on where the doctor guy, he starts complaining that his wife didn't bring home crackers. And I was really hoping, like, because the acting in this movie, it's A+ acting, I was really hoping that he would have some sort of outburst over that. Like, he kept bringing it up multiple times, and I was like, okay, here we go, he's gonna, like, flip out. And it didn't happen. I was like, damn it.
Yes. I do have to admit, that piece of dialogue was probably one of the better parts of the movie.
But we did get, I don't know if it's quite memorable, but it's definitely, I would consider a classic all-time freak out in the movie, which happens quite early. I think it's about 6-7 minutes in, where that nurse is running away, and she just runs. She runs straight through a fucking glass door like a boss. And it didn't even really make any noise either. She just ran through that thing. That's a highlight scene, and it happens right at the beginning, so, get on that. And those cops at the end, I mean, they were so trigger happy. The guy's just slowly taking one step towards him, and then starts firing away. They must be rookie cops or something.
I think, I may be wrong, but I feel like they were just security guards.
Well, they might have been, yeah, they might have been. I just felt like the uniform, I guess I can't recall now, but in any case, I mean, usually security guards don't get guns, do they?
Well, I would hope not based on them. Out of interest, how big do you think that town was?
I don't know, it didn't seem very big, but, I mean, there's a lot of rural type areas in this movie, and a lot of just long roads, that type of thing.
Yeah, like when that sheriff, knew the doctor and, talking about the doctor's wife, and it seems like most of them know each other. It doesn't seem like a particularly big place.
Mm.
And at the same time, if it's, like a population of, let's say, 3,000 people, is it really worth, worrying about this guy going around killing people? It's just like 3,000.
Yeah, I mean, he's melting anyway, he's gonna die soon. I don't know what they could have really done for him at the hospital, but who knows.
I think past a certain point, they were pretty much just wanting to study that, so it doesn't happen to the next people, which, if you see the ending, it's somewhat disappointing.
Mm. Well, I guess I should mention that, I'm just talking about this photographer in the movie. He's so eager to get those titties out, and he manages to, but in a way that I guess would be heavily frowned upon these days. Maybe not so much back in the 70s, but I guess I applaud his, not what he did, but his, I just like the fact that he managed to provide us with some titty action.
Well, that is worth mentioning because it's pretty much some of the only action we get in this movie.
I think that's probably why it's in the movie. They're like, how can we excite someone right now? Let's get some titties in here. I mean, it works to a degree.
And she was a decently attractive woman.
Yeah, so, The Incredible Melting Man, it's, the highlight is the special effects, obviously, and I think it's worth seeing for that reason, even though the entire movie itself is, it is dull for the most part. I'm going to throw this one a 6 out of 10. Originally, like I said, I originally thought it was quite boring, and then it got a little more entertaining on this. I think this is the third time I've watched it. Plus, I'm watching it in really good HD presentation, so that definitely helps, at least for me. I know if I had to watch this on VHS, I probably would have been bored out of my mind, because it's just something about the quality just helps my enjoyment of the film.
Well, that it's worth mentioning I've only seen this one once, so maybe with age, my point of view might improve. But for the time being, I find this an excruciatingly dull and quite slow movie. Save for the special effects, there's really not much here that's worth seeing. And it's definitely not a movie that I would call incredible. So I'm throwing this one a 4 out of 10.
Well, I mean, it's not one of those movies that's so bad it's good, but I think it's shitty enough to be amusing. And like I said, there's multiple scenes, like the nurse running through the door. I mean, there's a scene where these kids are playing hide and seek, and immediately after the girl stops counting, she's like, "Hey, where are you?" I'm like, I think you forgot how hide and seek works. They throw some titties in. There's a few bits and pieces to the movie. It's got its moments, but yes, as a whole, it's just not great. Not great at all.
And speaking of not great, we go to Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed from 2004, which is, believe it or not, the second Ginger Snaps movie, and the first one that came out in 2004. And this pretty much follows the story from the first movie, in which Bridget, who is now a bit of a werewolf herself, sort of gets captured and thrown into a rehab facility, and she has to deal with, sort of slowly transforming more and more into a werewolf because she can't take what she needs to prevent her from, becoming a werewolf. So you meet some characters in this rehab facility, and she escapes eventually, and then the second half of the movie is a lot worse. This is a movie I've only seen it twice now, and I was a big fan of the first movie. I gave the first movie a pretty high rating, and the first movie might be one of my favorite werewolf movies. But this I just don't care where the story goes in this one. I do appreciate how they brought back Catherine Isabel for Emily Porkin. She sort of has visions of her sister every now and again, so I appreciated that. But then we also have to deal with Ghost, who is a character that annoyed me half the time she was on screen.
Yeah.
And then there's some other things worth mentioning that I will mention, such as the, in my opinion, atrocious ending. But before I harp too much on that, what's your history with this one?
Yeah, I was a pretty big fan myself of the first one, to the point where as soon as this one came out, I believe it came out in America way before it did in Australia, so I imported it as soon as it came out on DVD, because like you, the original one is actually probably my favorite werewolf movie. I'm not a huge werewolf movie guy, but if I had to pick one, that's probably it. That's the only one that really comes to mind. But yeah, I've never been able to get into this one. Every time I put it on, I lose interest, as the movie goes along. I think it starts out okay. I mean, I like the librarian's pickup skills.
I wish I could get paid more on a side note.
Yeah. It's just a movie that as it moves along, once again, just like the movie we discussed earlier, it just doesn't really feel like it's getting anywhere. I mean, things happen. She's kind of turning into a werewolf, but nothing's... And by the end, we find out nothing really does happen, but I guess the one good thing about it is that, and this might be just because Robert Kurtzman is attached to it, is that I think the werewolf design is a bit better in this one than in the first, even though there's not much werewolf action in the first movie. It's more about the transition into becoming a werewolf, but that's really the only thing that I can say is maybe a little bit better than the first movie, but everything else pales in comparison. It's just tough to get through, and I don't even think it's necessarily a bad movie. It just fails to keep my attention. Which you could say, okay, that's a sign of a bad movie, but I mean, I'm interested in the character from the first movie, played by Emily Perkins. I mean, I'm somewhat interested in the movie just because I know she's in it, and she, it's a continuation of that, but I also don't really like her as a lead role either. I think she's much more suited to being that awkward side supporting role that she had in the first movie. Yeah, I don't know. It just... I think the thing is, I want it to be better, and it's just not.
Yeah, so I enjoyed the scenes where she was in the rehab facility. I enjoyed the first half of this movie significantly more than the second half. If only because in the second half we got a lot more Ghost, and like I said, that's a interesting character. She does occasionally have some funny quotes. The way that she speaks is intriguing, but as a character, she just barks the hell out of me. And like I said, the ending, if you take it as a literal ending, I think it's pretty horrible. I know that some people choose to take it as sort of like a not a dream, but maybe like a fantasy, one of the characters' fantasies, which would actually maybe make the ending a little better in that way, but at the same time, it means like this somewhat inconclusive as to what actually happens. I mean, I think regardless, they could have gone a better direction. And I think it's a real shame, because even though there is another Ginger Snaps movie, it has no relation to, well, not really in relation to these characters. So it's a shame that they sort of ended the story on this, especially like Chucky says, the first movie was, so good. And this movie isn't even horrible, but compared to the first movie, it seems like a definite decline in quality.
Yeah.
And also worth mentioning, I would have liked to know, who that werewolf was that was chasing Bridget. It would have been nice. I know that some people think it's one of the guys from the first movie, but it doesn't say anywhere in this movie. It's just some random werewolf who wants to mate with her, which, you
Yeah.
know, is a bit annoying. That's just me.
Yeah, I don't. I have no theories on that. It's just a random werewolf.
How do you feel though about that one guy who is giving all these rehab girls some drugs for, shall we say, favors?
Yeah, well, you know, pity he got suspended, but yeah, it might have been worth it. Well, you know, if you take it any way you can get it, I guess.
That's one point of view. This might not be the way I would choose to go about it, but to each their own. Oh, it's also worth mentioning, this movie did have a pretty interesting scene in the rehab facility. I'll be honest, I still don't know if this is supposed to be like a dream/fantasy, but that scene in which the group of girls are sort of, shall we say, relieving themselves, which always struck me as such a random scene because it, at least in my opinion, sort of came out of nowhere. Yeah, so this movie isn't, it's not a bad movie, and it seems like a lot of people seem to still enjoy it for what it is. It's just nowhere near as good as the first movie, and I feel like there's quite a few issues with this, be it the way the story goes, you know, the ending I think is somewhat pathetic, and then this Ghost who, like I keep saying, is a somewhat annoying character. Overall, I'm just going to give this a straight 7 out of 10, which is an average rating for me. So it's not particularly good, it's not particularly terrible, it just sort of is. And that's just disappointing when you think about how good the first movie was.
Man, that score is higher than I was expecting based on what you were saying about it. I'm going with a 6 out of 10, and to be honest, I even struggled to get to the 6. I was considering a 5. And yeah, the big thing is just the fact that it's just, I mean, it's following up such a good movie with such a mediocre movie. And the only reason like normally for a mediocre movie I would give that a 5, and the only reason it slightly gets up higher is that it's attached to the first movie in some way, and I guess that does something for me, but like I said, every time I watch this, it's just a struggle to get through the entire thing. I still enjoy parts of the movie, it's just, as a whole, damn, I just wish this was a lot better. Anyways, speaking of better...
I'm going to assume that was a joke, but we'll talk about it.
Okay. So we're moving on to Stuck from 2007, which, as I was saying earlier, is, I believe it's the last movie that Stuart Gordon ever directed, as he did pass away earlier this year. And Stuck is just, it's about one person's shit day colliding with another. I mean, the story, it's a story of a man who gets struck by a car and he's stuck inside the windshield of this young lady's car, and she refuses to help the guy because even though he was jaywalking at the time, she had taken some ecstasy before leaving the club, and I guess she's afraid of what could happen from that. He gets more pissed because she won't help him, she gets more pissed because he keeps trying to escape from her garage, and then eventually, you know, stuff happens. The funny thing is, this movie opens with a scene in a nursing home. You know, it's just got old people playing boring board games or just doing whatever old people do, and they got this like gangster rap playing over it. And that was quite amusing. You know, anytime you see gangster rap being played over a nursery home scene, that usually alludes to something enjoyable. And I thought this movie was enjoyable. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. It's a pretty simple thing, but once again, like Wrong Turn, it's a movie that kind of knows its runtime. It's pretty short. I think it only got to somewhere around the 80-minute mark. But I found it mildly suspenseful. You know, it was an entertaining movie. So it sounds like you didn't enjoy it as much as I did. What do you think of this?
Well, yeah, so for one, the No, I'm not going to even try to pronounce her name, but the lead actress.
Mina Savari.
Yeah. For those who may not know, and I recognized her immediately, but she is one of the girls from American Pie, which I sort of like that. That was a I didn't know that going in. I've never seen this before, so it's always nice to see a face that you know. But she played one of the most unlikable characters I've seen in my life. She starts out fine. Anybody who's in that type of job, caring for elderly people, that takes a dedication that not everybody has. So, I feel like those people should get all the respect in the world. But it seems pretty obvious to me that she's just doing this to sort of, I don't know, for herself, supposed to help the people. And just her reaction after she, hits hits this guy, it's just appalling. And this is based somewhat off a actual event. Movie changes things drastically, as movies usually do. But her character annoyed the hell out of me. I thought maybe she might redeem herself in some way, toward the second half of the movie, but it never happens. She just gets really batshit crazy. And it's interesting because, like I said, never seen this movie before. Wasn't sure where it was going, but then 50, maybe 60 minutes later, he's total in the garage. I'm like, oh god, because for most of the movie, we're just following the lead woman and her boyfriend / not boyfriend after what happened. And I didn't find much of that interesting. It's possibly because she seems so far removed from how I feel like most people would react to a situation like that. See, I guess I should say I didn't even hate the movie. It just was. I was watching it. It was fine. It's not like I had a deeply negative reaction to it. It just, there was a few amusing scenes. I like the black boyfriend. He was sort of funny, but it just nothing happened that really got me like, oh hey, this is actually really good, or hey, this is definitely worth watching. It just was, which is somewhat disappointing.
Okay. Well, I think this one is enjoyed somewhat by most people. It's got a 6 point something out of 10 on IMDb, which is a respectable rating. Yeah, I found the movie entertaining, trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and how many other movies are there about a guy stuck in a car windshield? I can't think of any. So it's unique in that regard.
That's true, but then you have to ask how many movies should there be about a guy stuck in a car window.
I don't know. After seeing this one, I might wonder a few more.
And actually, that reminds me. So there's a scene somewhat early on when the guy's honking the horn, then the woman comes and sort of knocks him out, and then takes her taxi to her workplace. And then once the guy wakes up, he doesn't immediately go back to honking the horn, which I thought would be the first thing I would do. He does try to get to his cell phone, which, that makes sense, it's fine. Which is, that scene itself is, somewhat suspenseful, hey, can he reach it? It's fine. To be clear, it's a very tragic situation to be in. I was sort of thinking, hey, what would I do in that situation? I'll probably go back to the, horn. Just keep doing that as long as you can, and hopefully nobody knocks you out.
Yeah, well, he is technically dying, I guess, so,
that's that. I think windshield wiper impaled him, it looked like. That's pretty painful.
Yeah, so, you can only do something for so long, I guess. Plus, in terms of a movie, maybe at some point he did honk it again, but the movie's just trying to move along. Okay, let's show the audience something new, something different, so let's go to the cell phone. But by the way, I think she said the battery died, and I'm like, oh, one of those old Nokias or whatever, they'd stay charged for weeks.
Yeah.
My phone right now, I can barely keep it charged for a day.
I still use a flip phone, and yeah, it keeps its charge for quite some time.
Yeah. I used to have one of those flip phones too. Yeah, they last. So a bit surprising that one died. Bit of bad luck, but then again, he's having a lot of bad luck that day.
Talk about a shitty day.
Well, it's shitty 2 days, really, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a disappointing time. Even when he's just trying to get a little sleep on the park bench, of course. If I was him, I would have gone a little deeper into the park, not just right near the gate. but I get it. But yeah, it's I do like how they did it, throw him under the bus, toward the end of the movie. Some movies might have him make it out, but like, oh look what this guy did to this innocent woman. But
Yeah.
that does not look like the direction this movie goes in, which I did appreciate.
Well, they never really get to that point. I mean,
That's true, but I especially once the Latino family sort of helps him up, they're definitely going to, I think, back him up. Like, hey, they did see this guy in the car, especially the mother. If it was just a kid, that'd be one thing, but even the mother saw him, so I feel like guy's probably going to be okay.
the funny thing is, at the beginning of the movie, he's kind of wondering where he's going to spend the night. I guess he found a place to spend the night, in someone's garage.
So are you saying you should be careful what you ask for?
Yeah, in a way. Another scene, towards the beginning, he goes to what he thinks is like a job interview. It seems to be more of an employment services type place, who, you're not really interviewing for a job, they're just helping you find a job, I guess. And I mean, I've been in those type of places when I was really young, and I think a lot of people have, but they're really annoying places to deal with at times, and you can see why in this movie. He fills out this form, he gets this interview at 1 p.m, by about 4:30 p.m, he finally gets to speak to someone, and they're basically like, just go back and fill out the form you've already filled out, and I feel like that that guy working there, like, he was just saying that because it's 4:30. Fuck it, I can't be. I couldn't be bothered talking to anyone right now. Let's just figure out a way to get this guy out of the office. You're not in the computer, man. Yeah, they can just be really annoying to deal with. we had one of the biggest ones in Australia at the time, at least when I was, around that early adult age looking for work. They're called Mission Australia, but I would call them Mission Impossible. Because every time you go in there, it's just like the same old routine. I guess I should say, I did get one job from them once, which did actually last a few years, but usually they just give you stuff that lasts for 10 days, and, it's not a great place to...
Hey, at least you get something.
Yeah, I guess, but, sometimes the jobs you get there, not only are they not worth your time, sometimes they make you regret going in the first place. But anyways, moving back to this movie, I think we're both in agreement that the worst thing that Mena Suvari's character does in the movie is steal the newspaper from the neighbor.
That's probably not the direction I'd go, but it's certainly sort of a dick move.
Was that the Latino family's house? I'm not sure, but...
Oh, I actually don't know.
It seemed to be from the house on the right, which I'm sure was their house. I believe they lived next door. Or at least they lived very close by. So, I don't know, it's something about that. She's like a normal person, she's got a regular job, and she kind of made a mistake one night where, it's obviously affected someone greatly, and now she's got a fear of going to jail or something like that, and which I'm sure a lot of normal people out there would have a similar type of feeling. And obviously she does a lot of bad things. She goes about it in the wrong way. But we can kind of see why. But of course, by the end of the movie, it's a bit of a calmer moment where, he gives her the opportunity. Well, this is a bit of a spoiler, but once he's kind of out and it seems like he's flipped the table on her, he could have just burnt her alive. And then... He chooses not to and just leave her, so technically maybe not help her, but he doesn't kill her when he could have, because that's what they were trying to do to him. And yeah, it backfires on her when she goes to shoot him, obviously, but at that point I guess you could kind of say, okay, now she's a bad person, but I think throughout the majority of the movie she's just a regular person, just like everyone else who made some terrible decisions.
Yeah, I think as soon as you hit somebody, you know you hit somebody, and you guys on your halfway in your car and you just keep going, at that point you sort of cross the horizon. You are officially probably not a good person. And that scene though where she's driving right by the police, and of course the racists that are going after the black homeless guy. That was just a beautiful scene, indictment on the police of this country.
I'm so surprised he didn't shoot her like when he first gets out of that garage, because I mean he's already stabbed the boyfriend in the eye. Like he's already killed one guy. I mean, you might as well kill her too. I mean, so I'm kind of surprised he didn't at that point. But, he's just too nice, I guess. It's mainly because when he kills the boyfriend, like stabs him in the eye, he doesn't just stab him in the eye to get away. He stabs him in the eye and then he goes up even further and presses it in. I don't think it was probably all that necessary, but
I mean, at that point, like, who can really blame him? I mean, it's just
yeah. But I'm just saying, if you're going to kill someone like that, I mean, surely you could have shot her outside. Maybe it wouldn't have looked good, but I'm just kind of surprised he didn't at that point, based on everything he's gone through.
Maybe he is a bigger man than both of us.
Yeah. So, yeah, I enjoyed this movie well enough. I almost wanted to give it an 8, but I just can't go that far. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. It was a movie from start to finish. I was completely engaged in it. Like I was saying, it's another one of those movies that kind of knows its runtime. It is about 80 minutes. It didn't have any scenes where I just felt like nothing was happening. There was always something happening, even though the guy's stuck in a windshield. So, yeah, I was quite impressed with what they could do with such a simple type of movie where, technically there's not much place to go. Anyways, I have a feeling that Jiggy here wants to go poo-poo on this movie.
Oh, see, actually, the thing is not so much. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's a particularly good movie, but I don't think it's like atrocious. I think the movie knew what it was going for, and for those of people who enjoy this type of movie, it's fine. So, I mean, I think it's a below average movie, but I'm just giving this a 6 out of 10. It's not like I hated it. I was pretty indifferent through a lot of it, and there were some funny moments, like I said, some okay characters, but just most of the movie we're following this completely unlikable woman, and the ending's somewhat satisfying, but you have to get there. Even if it's a shorter movie, you still have to get there. So I mean, I think a 6 out of 10. That's not like overly terrible. So it's an okay movie, just not necessarily my type of movie.
Well, just for everyone else out there listening, just know that we had just reviewed Ginger Snaps 2, and Jiggy here gave it a 7. So please feel free to shit on him in the comments, because there's no way this movie is worse than Ginger Snaps 2. No way at all.
And if it makes it any easier for people to shit on me, the 1980 The Shining is terribly overrated, and it's definitely not that good of a movie.
Wow, look, I don't love that movie either, but I probably enjoy it a bit more than you do.
Ginger Snaps 2 is about the movie than The Shining.
No, but
there you go. I'm just making it easy for people. Anyhow, this last movie is a somewhat interesting choice, and that would be from 1985, Cut and Run, in which it pretty much follows a newswoman and her cameraman. They go, I forget what country do they even go to. I don't remember. They go to some jungle.
Some jungle. I'm trying to think of the name. It's kind of there on the tip of my tongue, but yeah.
Yeah, I honestly forget what jungle. So my apologies, but so they go to a jungle tracking down. Well, in my opinion, it's not actually clear why they're going to the jungle. Half of it seems like they're looking for the missing son of a TV executive. Another half they want to interview this guy who is supposed to be deceased, and another half they want to follow the drugs. which seemed to be coming from there. And whilst they're doing this, there's a sort of a native tribe of these somewhat primitive tribe people going around killing people, and of course they're being led by Michael Berryman, which is always nice to see. In my opinion, one of his better roles in this movie. And they have to deal with being chased by these terrifying people. So this is a movie I had not seen before. It's been on my radar for years. I never knew too much about it. So finally watching it, I was somewhat disappointed. I wasn't necessarily surprised, especially after seeing another one of this guy's movies, Body Count, which we talked about, let's say like 8 episodes back, which is also a somewhat disappointing movie. But I mean, this one is, I think the first thought is pretty decent, but I'll be honest and say that I was losing interest as the movie went on. Though that said, it is definitely worth watching if for the gore and death alone.
Well, just before I get into my thoughts, I will just mention that we did watch the unrated version of this. So if that's a question to anyone, I want to clear that up straight away. We watched the unrated version. The movie is on Tubi, and I think it's on Amazon Prime at the moment, but those are the R-rated cut versions, so if you watch that, you're going to miss out on pretty much most of the gore and violence, or at least, the significant parts of it.
Yeah, if this is your type of movie, I would highly recommend not watching this off either Tubi or Prime.
Yeah. Not to say Tubi and Prime aren't good streaming platforms, they are, it's just not for this movie.
Yeah, because there's such great scenes, and actually one of them that probably one of the baddest scenes in the movie is I posted it on another one of my sites, and it's just this fantastic death scene. But I'm sorry, as you will.
I have a feeling it's the one where the guy gets torn apart.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Actually rewound it and watched it again.
Yeah. But yeah, for my opinion on the actual movie itself, I remember watching this, and I actually, I had nothing to compare to, so I actually did watch this a little while back, and it was the unrated version that I did originally watch as well. So immediately, that one scene that I talked about, the guy getting ripped apart, and then there's a couple of other scenes too, but, there's some moments in the movie that really make you kind of go, wow, what you just saw. And I guess for that reason, I liked it even more than I really did when I rated it originally. So this second time watching it, I still fairly enjoyed the movie. I just didn't, the rating I originally gave it didn't match up to my enjoyment of it the second time around. So I think it's still a decent movie. Now, obviously, whenever you think of the director's movies, Cannibal Holocaust, that comes up. That's another movie that I rate similarly to this in terms of enjoyment. I mean, this it moves at a decent pace, I guess. It's got some very energetic 80s music.
I do enjoy the music.
The music's a bit of a highlight in this one, so I don't know how you could watch it and not kind of get pumped by the music that gets played along in this one. But yeah, the movie, I mean, it doesn't lose my interest, but yeah, it just feels like, okay, we're just kind of moving along the jungle and, things are happening. And
yeah, I guess one thing that sort of, I don't know if it bothered me, but it made it feel somewhat less suspenseful. These people, the woman and the cameraman, they know that these people are, watching them. Throughout, tries to 3 times, they either scare them by, the snake basket for one. I mean, they know they're there. I mean, they could attack them anytime they wanted. So, when they finally get to the, little, I don't know, port, water area, and they finally find the kid, I mean, who doesn't think they're going to be caught, shortly thereafter? And, hey, they are caught shortly thereafter. And I also have to mention, I guess you could call the main antagonist of this movie, I know there's a few, and Berryman being my favorite by far, but Richard Lynch, I really liked him in Bad Dreams, which is a movie I know that Chucky didn't particularly enjoy, but In this movie, that guy, more than anything, it just annoyed me. He has this like philosophical ramblings that I have no idea what he was trying to say. I'm assuming it was against the Western culture or something, but it's not really made clear. And my advice to any philosophers, if you have something deep to say, try to say it in a way that people can understand what you're saying. Otherwise, you just look like a pretentious dick.
He might have been high on his own supply.
Yeah, that is very possible. I mean, I feel like he wasn't really worth being like the big bad guy. Like he was, and like the whole ending scene too, where he's giving his like live speech as it was. It's not like when he did what he did, and then I think it's Karen Black's character. Like, oh my god! Like, first of all, if you happen to be watching something like that, why would you react so strongly? Like, if you're in there in person, I get it, but her reaction just seemed way, way over the top to the situation.
Yeah, Karen Black was in this, I guess, just to put a name in the movie, but man, it just reminds me of how she has a really weird face. I didn't have too many points on this one, but the other thing I did want to say, the black guy in the movie, the kind of like pimp type guy played by Eric LaSalle, or better known as the Soul Glow guy from Coming to America. In theory, his death in the movie is like it's the idea behind it is quite gruesome, but I just wish, out of all the deaths that they have that are graphic in the movie, I just wish his would have been more graphic.
And actually, now that you mention it, his death, in my opinion, was somewhat ridiculous.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I understand. I'd be surprised if he wasn't killed for what he did. But he's like, as soon as he's on the phone, these two guys are coming at him. Like, it seemed a bit much. I mean, I don't know. This was an enjoyable movie. It's not like it's not like I hated this. Although I have to say, if I had seen the cut version, I probably would not have enjoyed this nearly as much. Because I actually watched the beginning musical, both the uncut and the cut version, just to see the differences. And let me tell you, the cut version is so much more tame. Like it's definitely worth watching the uncut movie. Obviously, some of the best scenes are in that version too. I don't know. Even the story here didn't particularly interest me that much. That one kid, I forget the name of the actor, but his acting was a bit iffy, and I don't know, just the small things in this movie that just didn't work for me. And the ending itself, like I said, I think it's somewhat anticlimactic. It is worth mentioning though. Here's a fun fact: I've never actually seen Cannibal Holocaust, so I'm assuming, because I've seen other cannibal movies, like maybe Jungle Holocaust or Mountain of the Cannibal God. So I enjoy those. So I'm assuming I'll enjoy Cannibal Holocaust whenever I get to it. But this movie just seems, even though it is a bit more violent with the uncut version, it still seems somewhat tame. And it definitely seems more of a action oriented as opposed to anything else. Which is fine. It's still an enjoyable movie. It's just not quite as good as I was sort of hoping it would be.
I'm kind of surprised that you haven't watched Cannibal Holocaust, considering you're more of a found footage guy than I am.
Well, see, so I was actually working on watching, other quote-unquote big Italian cannibal movies in order they came out, and I sort of stopped after Mountain of the Cannibal God, which was 78, so I never actually got to 1980, and also I think the other movie that John Saxon came out then too, which I haven't seen yet. Cannibal Apocalypse, if I recall. So I've not seen either one, so whenever I get to them, I should be in for a good time. Once we do our cannibal night.
Well, we've already done like 2 cannibal movies in one show today, so...
Is this really a cannibal movie?
Well, I guess not. Well... Yeah, I mean... If you've seen Cannibal Holocaust, you would feel like these characters pretty much feel like they're of same or similar tribe to these other ones, I guess, in a way, but I guess you could say it's not.
I mean, I wish it was.
Yeah, I guess they're not, because we never really see them chop up anyone to eat. Usually when you go around killing people, you don't waste the meat, so they would have taken some bodies with them if they were.
It is worth mentioning, this tribe is pretty creepy though. I love like there's like I think 2 scenes at the beginning and then like one, midway through, where they, just go in for the attack. Both of them are fantastically fun scenes. So, like I said, I've not seen this one before. I enjoyed finally getting to see it, and I definitely enjoyed watching the uncut version, but it wasn't a movie I particularly loved, and I might still recommend it, if only because I think the gore is worth seeing. And just seeing that one guy getting, ripped, and have those some quality stuff. And you can find that scene on YouTube too if you know where to look. It's a decent movie. I like the vibe. I just didn't care that much for some of the plot. In some ways, the plot almost felt more complicated than it needed to be. Like they threw in Jonestown. They didn't need to do all that stuff. It's an okay movie, bit below average, and I'm throwing it a 6 out of 10.
I'm gonna go with a 7 out of 10 for this one. Yeah, I enjoyed it enough. I didn't enjoy it as much a second time around as I did the first, and I think that's just because the wow factor of the gore had dissipated to some degree. It's one of those things where you see it for the first time, it's so surprising, and it wows you, but the more you see it, the less it does that. Yeah, so I think people watching this for the first time, when they see some of those scenes, they'll have the same reaction.